similar to being in a project, if you want, like because you have to find your own path because the saxophone player, you don't play traditional bebop the same way a trumpet would play, and even if you practice and you try to play bebop, you always be a jazz violinist, even if you think you are a trumpet player. So at the end of the day, Jean-Luc Ponty helped me a lot thinking about this perspective. And if you want to fit in the jazz violin box, then people will consider you like Stefan Grappelli. They will expect you to sound like Stefan Grappelli because that's the most acceptable way of playing jazz violin in our society. When you hear Stefan Grappelli, the classical players and the jazz player are all agreeing that is how you should sound. But if you sound a certain way and it's not too close to Stefan Grappelli, you're gonna be kind of a catered put in on a bench in a way. And Jean-Luc Ponty did that pretty well actually. He kind of like changed this idea of doing jazz violin, but is still considered as a fusion player. Like a lot of people see him as a fusion player, which is not very accurate because he does bebop, he does hard bop, he does new age. It covers. He will be the Miles Davis of violin to me. So because he covered every era of jazz. But anyway, so it's a long discussion. So a lot of the pop singers that we know today, like John Legend, or that I work with just last week with John Legend new album. So because I'm mentioning him, so John Legend or Adele or even like Prince, even Michael Jackson. I never worked with Michael Jackson, but if you listen to those people, Quincy Jones, they are always very knowledgeable about jazz. Either they were a jazz musician before, or they are extremely close to the jazz roots or church music that is also very intertwined with jazz history. So it's interesting to see that everything has a connection somehow. But for me, I think it's important to know where you're starting and where you're looking. What is your perspective location? Like, where are you coming from? Are you coming from as a classical musician? Are you a jazz musician? Are you a rock musician? Are you a composer? And are you all of them? Sometimes you could be a mix of this. You can be a pop musician and a jazz singer, or you could be a jazz violinist and a producer, So then you can add them. But I think it's important to kind of identify who you are, in terms of, maybe, I'm just trying to explain, but it's hard to explain actually. So, yeah. When you think about the journey, it's just like practicing jazz, learning how it works, learning the history in terms of not in the books, but more in the sound of checking out albums, checking out records, and looking at the liner notes and looking how it was made and why. Because not because I want to know, because I'm a historian. No, because I want to understand the mindset of the players to understand the psychology behind it, so I can kind of tune my mindset to them, so I can understand their process. So it was more that, and then eventually when I studied the jazz element, I realized that some rock musicians or hip hop players, or like things that are also considered pop music, were using some of the elements that I heard in jazz, and sometimes in just a little hint. Sometimes it's very obvious. Even in classical music, sometimes in the later composers, when they are close to the jazz era, at the same time there are like parallel layers. Even Prokofiev, if you hear Prokofiev, you can hear some element of jazz. Even Debussy, when you hear modal jazz and Debussy, there's like parallel. But what I'm saying is like, when you say it's all music, it's true. I agree with that. But in the approach, I think for me, you have to come from kind of an angle or a location, and my location was jazz, so I came from the location of jazz, and that's my perspective from a jazz musician. I'm looking outside and I'm looking at all the music, and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to try to, because if I play classical music right now, I would be not playing classical music. I would play playing classical music as a jazz musician, or
Right.
play rock music. I would play rock music as a jazz violinist. So I can certainly play different styles because I play in different contexts. But I always bring with me my kind of my vision, my perspective as a jazz player. So it's never really a style. It's mostly me navigating different styles, but I'm still keeping. And when I say jazz musician and jazz violinist, I don't also put myself in a jazz violinist box either, because I'm a jazz musician first, so before the violin. So and I'm yeah, it's a complex question, but I think uh, when I play different styles or different contexts more than style, it's about the players or the composers or the people that are in this project. If I work with Hans Zimmer on a project, I know he's a guitarist and a pianist, but mostly a guitarist, and he plays jazz. Hans Zimmer also played rock, guitar, and jazz. So he has influence with jazz, and he's not a jazz musician, but he studied jazz and he wanted to be a jazz musician. Same thing for John Williams. If you work with John Williams on a movie score, you can hear that his harmony and his concept and context are very close to jazz harmony or classical romantic harmonies. So there's like even in people that have different world from you, there's also different layers from them, and my layers are different from them, but we can always understand each other or have some common grounds, to. So yeah, same thing like if I work with a hip hop artist or pop singer. um
As like for example, a trumpet player. Trumpet players consider like their tone the most important thing, like their sound. I mean, if you're a violinist, that's a little different because you can kind of play with um, the amp and controls such as that. But kind of what has been maybe your perspective on that? Because personally, that's something I'm working on as well.
oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah, so yeah, the sound, I think, whether you using an amp or you're playing acoustic, it's the most important thing for any music, not only in classical or jazz, but in any expressive art. So the sound even of your voice as a singer, the sound, the texture of your voice as a composer as well. But mostly when you play physically the instrument. So I would say like it's the primary elements that define who you are. So um, I use amp and I also play acoustic, but when I use an amp, it's also a new instrument that you have to develop. So I think some of the things that I learned throughout the years, it's like you have to spend as much time as practicing acoustic that you as making you sound on an amp, or learning how to make it work for your specific instrument, because every violin is going to sound different with a pickup on it. So you have to study the pickups as you study the sound and classical music. So you have to buy different pickups. If you can rent some, go to music store, or if you can, you're lucky to have like a brand sending you a few samples, you can test them, test them on the bandstand with different players, so you can see how the sounds, how it works with a drummer, and do your research, because when I was 14, I spent quite 2 years just exploring different pickup. Every day I would practice like 5 hours with an amp and trying to find if I tweak this and this and this amp, and then with preamps and blah blah blah. So and then also with mixing at the studio. So it's all those things where makes you more in tune with your instrument, because playing electroacoustic or amplified with an instrument, with a violin, a string instrument, is very different. It's some of the most critical thing you will ever do, even if you go on tour and you need an engineer that help you. So you need to have notions. So I wrote a book about this, and it's not published, but it's for my students. And I put the the EQ, exact image EQ for violin, for viola, for cello, and where you have to bypass, where you have to cut, when you have to boost the mids or remove the mids. So you can have the most natural, or I would say like the most clear sound, but not too clear, because if it's too clear, then it's too bright. No, so even it's a matter of test, But yeah, so this is the first thing. And the second thing is like I think for me, sound is as important as phrasing, as articulations, and also finding your own sound. It's a journey, and it will evolve throughout the years. It's just like you when you talk. You're gonna change your intonation. You're gonna have a different way of expressing yourself because you're learning things along the way, and I guess it's part of the work. But yeah, it shouldn't be overlooked, and I think it shouldn't be seen as superficial to spend hours or months or years just focusing on the sound rather than focusing on the phrase or the solos. I think they work together. You can work on your solos. You can work on transcribing stuff and blah blah blah. But if you don't work on your sound, I think all those things will be not heard or seen. So it's like breathing. You need to breathe before you talk. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
In my opinion, but this is my opinion, so it's not like
Mm.
not the truth. It's not truth.
Yeah.
It's my truth.